Hi there! You're about to see a presentation from the Educator to Entrepreneur Networking Group, and this is Sarah Torpy presenting for us. Typically, we do a presentation and then breakout rooms to discuss, but since we had a more intimate crowd, we decided to just get our conversation in the main room. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope to see you at a meeting soon. Thank you.
So Lizzie asked me to talk about identity shift. Because when she and I talked ages ago, the first time, we spent a lot of time talking about, like, I used to be a teacher and then I didn't know who I was anymore, right? Like that weird feeling of in-betweenness that you get when you're going to the new thing, but you don't want to not be the old thing because the old thing wasn't bad. You liked the old thing, but you're going to be somebody new in this whole thing. Yes. So we got talking a lot about that, and that's why we landed here. This is something I talk to people about a ton. And I have thoughts on. So the real question I think in here is, I'm trying to make this smaller. Hold on. Uh-oh. It's how you become someone new without also losing who you were, right? You want to be this new person, but you don't want to look down on who you were, what you were doing. You loved it. You want to shift, but you don't want the shift to be like as painful as possible, because you know how hard we make it for ourselves sometimes. It really just, it's like, how do we do this and make it easy is the key question here. So I have a couple of 6, I think, key things that I think about all the time that really helped me along the path that I know I've talked to other people about for a long time. And these are the things I'm going to share today. So the first one is, honestly, I feel like some of these are obvious, but it's really helpful to have someone say them to you, right? Is to know that changing career identity, where you identify, how you even introduce yourself, right? Changing that is hard. Like, it's not the easiest thing you've ever done. It's particularly hard inside out. And we forget to acknowledge that it's actually a hard thing to do. That, like, it is more than just you introduced yourself with a different word the first time, that it's about parts of you. And like, I never knew that I wouldn't be a full-time in a classroom teacher. Like, I haven't been a full-time in a classroom teacher since 2010. And there are still days where I'm like, oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? Who did this? Because, 10-year-old me knew that I would be a teacher, right? And thought that that would always be the case. And now I do something different, and I have learned to see the teaching in it. But my 10-year-old self is like, what the heck did you do? This is a hard change. It never really is fully done. And not everybody gets it, right? Because there are still people I run into in my world are like, you're still teaching? And you're like, why'd you have to poke that today? Right? So I think that's the first thing to remember. It's okay if this isn't the easiest, most feel good thing all the time. And some days it'll feel great, and some days you'll be like, oh, worst decision ever. It's okay. You're not, everybody's there with you. The second one I don't like, and I understand none of us like, but I think one of the ways it gets easier over time to shift into somebody new is to literally practice it. You have done this. I have done this. I thank God we talk on our phones in the car now, because otherwise I'd look like a crazy everywhere I go, because I'm constantly in the car practicing saying something. For the start of my business, it would be like, hi, I'm Sarah. It's so nice to meet you. I'm a business coach. And I'd be like, whoa, that sounded crazy. Right. And practicing saying it out loud in the car. Right. I also think I make a lot of maps, and I always have, where I write down all the things I was good at in my classroom, or with students, or with colleagues, or when I was coaching teachers. And then I draw arrows to map out what exactly those things are in my business. Right? Making the maps of skill to skill is like the practice proof, where you're like, oh no, I knew how to do this. I actually just had a connect call with somebody like an hour ago from a different group. And she said, well, but I don't, she's like not talking to enough new people in her new business. And I said, why aren't you talking to people? She's like, well, I network like crazy in my real job. And I was like, well, but can't we just take that over here? You obviously know how to do it really well. but it was just like as she missed the skill map, right? So it's about mapping the skills over and practicing remembering you have them, right? Because you have all of these really important skills. You could probably tell me too right now, things you did in your classroom that you absolutely use in a million different ways, right? All day, every day, in your business, with people when you connect, all of those things. There's all these skills that you just picked up and moved over, whether you realized it or not, right? Um, so one of the pictures I think about a lot is a spiral staircase. And so if you imagine it in your head, imagine it like a spiral staircase that has walls all around it that you could touch, right? Think of that spiral staircase and imagine each of the walls has something on it like money or doubt or feeling like an imposter or I don't know, all whatever particular thing you get in your head most about, right? What happens is every time we touch one of those walls on the spiral staircase, we're in that drama, right? We touch it all the time, but then we walk up. So what'll happen is you'll be like, oh, I've been introducing myself as a business coach and I've been doing all these things. And then I hit this wall and I all of a sudden feel like I don't belong here, right? You're like, oh God, I'm here again. Well, no, you're not actually here again. You've walked up the steps and you're just touching it again in a new place, right? It's like when you figure out your pricing the first time and then you raise it, you're touching pricing again, just in a new way. Like all those worries and those things, they're always there. We just get to have new fun interactions with them, which is maybe not reassuring, or maybe it is, right? But what I always remember is I am walking up the staircase. If I ran into it again, it's because I'm now touching it in a new way. Like, are there things that you encounter again and again this way? Like, do you have any that you would tell me about? Or is that too scary? Am I too scary? I know Lizzie and I have talked about this, so
Yeah, I can share mine to get the ball rolling.
yeah.
I, I, whenever somebody from my past that doesn't know I'm not teaching anymore has that like, oh, how's your classroom? That moment it gets me like it's a stab in the heart every time. And I had an email from like a professor that I just loved that was like, hey, where are you teaching now? I want to put it in the newsletter. And I was like, oh, this email is hard to write. The like, nope, not teaching music anymore. So for me, it's that telling a new person, like, nope, that's not me anymore. That one's hard.
Well, and it's different than the first time you did it, right? You've like walked up and then it comes back and somebody else asks you and you're like, ah, but then
Uh-huh,
you say it,
uh-huh.
right? And eventually it'll just be like, oh gosh, I don't do that anymore.
Right.
Right? And because you've walked, a couple of layers up the staircase. For me, it is always about whether or not I belong. Right? It is always like the one in my head, I always think about it as my just a teacher. Like, well, I don't really get to do that. I'm just a teacher. And then it's like, wait, who? Like, hold on, who said that? That's ridiculous. A, because no one's just a teacher. Teachers work their asses off. And B, like that's wild. Like there's no certification that says I'm allowed to do whatever I'm allowed to do, and teaching is different, right? So for me, this one, it's always the back to like, well, I don't really belong teaching that because I'm just a teacher. And then I have to come back to it. I'm just at a new spot in the staircase. Like at first it was business at all, and then it was sales specifically, and then it's whatever thing, right? That's the third one. The next one is, I'm sorry about this, but I'm not also sorry about this, but it would really help you to use your journal. And I say that to you as a very reluctant journaler. Like I am converted, but I under protest to journaling, essentially. Like I don't love it. My journal sits right here on my desk, and I make myself write in it every day because I know I make more money when I am writing in my journal regularly. But sometimes my journal has to go to journal jail when I write something down I didn't want to deal with, and it has to go sit on the other side of the room for a day or two. Because I don't, where you write something down. Have you ever written something down and been like, oh no, I can't believe, right? Melanie's done it where you're like, God, oops.
My challenge with journaling is because I am a writer, and that's like my primary like
Mm.
way I express myself in a lot of ways, that I am a very reluctant journaler just because it's not how I overthink it. And I have found with journaling, I lie to myself incredibly well when I journal. Like it because I can write what I think I want to hear, and it's so funny. I'm more vulnerable and more honest when I'm thinking I'm writing for an audience.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really weird, and I'm in therapy.
Me
But
too. Don't worry.
like, yeah. But I am no, I'm very, very good at lying to myself in a journal, and I will like avoid doing it. So I aspire to be a journaler, but I will shortcut things, and I think some of that is ADHD also.
Yep,
But
that's fair.
it's so interesting because I am a writer, and journaling is so hard for me.
I find so I find I need rules. Like very specific rules. So like I have these very goofy specific rules. Like I set a 7-minute timer. I never have to write more than a page, and there is always a specific question. And I literally, like, you're gonna laugh, but there is on my desk a cup full of questions. And what I have to do in the morning is pick a question from this cup because they are pre-made. And then I have to use the whatever came out of the cup is what I have to answer, whether I like it or not. And that for me sort of forces my honesty a little bit because I also can write myself. I'm like, no, no, everything's great, but I also know when I'm bullshitting myself, just like you do. Right. So I need rules and direction because without it, I just will be like, whoop, boop, 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 write whatever I want. Um, that helps me a ton, but I wonder I'd be curious to think what kind of rules or like what kind of question starters would get you would poke a little harder at you. Do you know what I mean? Not in an unpleasant way, but it like a
No, I think they need to be specific, because generally when I
yes.
like lie to myself in my journal, it's trying to answer the question, what do I want in life? Because Lord. But
Yes.
I think they need to be more specific.
Well, and often you can take those, I tend to take those questions and make them today questions. Like, what do I want today? Is a very different question than what do I want? It's a very different level of question to bullshit, right? Like, what do I want today or what do I need today versus what do I need in general? So I tend to make them very specific to the time period. That helps me a ton. Um, the number of questions in that cup that say today on them is probably greater than half, which annoys me to no end when I pick one. Like I'm constantly yelling at the questions in the cup, which is why y'all shouldn't have to see me here in the morning with my journal. Um, okay, number 5 is you're never starting over. Like no, not ever. This is one of my favorites because I think what happens is people start to shift into a new identity and they're like, well, but I'm brand new at this. I love you. None of us are 20 and you're not. You're bringing all kinds of expertise from wherever you were to wherever you're going. Like that's just it. It doesn't, there's things you learned. They all apply. They all matter. It's never fresh. Like, and that's a good thing, friends. Like you're never, not ever starting from scratch. That's a win. So when you tell yourself you're brand new and you don't know anything, like that's a lie. Honestly. Does that mean you don't have questions? No. Does it mean you don't need help? No. Like none of us know everything about everything. That's fine. But you know enough to start with. You got this far. You had the idea, right? You're doing the things. You problem solved through, I mean, I taught 7th graders, right? Like I got through those days. Nobody, like we all didn't burn the building down, though I do suspect I taught math and science, and there were times where I think we came close. I'm not gonna lie. They once did a fire drill in the middle of us doing a fire-based lab experiment that I had to like manage before we walked out the door. You would think they'd have checked with me, but I was literally the next classroom down from the office. They usually actually poked their head in before they did things like that, but they didn't that day. And I was like, oh, okay, this is how we all burn the building down. But it's not, you're not brand new. And for me, this is fundamentally reassuring in so many ways to know that like I have stuff, I brought stuff with me, I have suitcases full of tools. I just don't always know what's in the suitcase. Right? It's like opening a box after you move and you're like, what the heck is in here? You have more than you realize. And this one is the hardest one of the bunch, I think. Becoming someone new, shifting into a new role, into a new version of yourself is not an overnight thing, right? This is the same place we started, just a different part of the coin to a degree. It has to be allowed to take the time it takes. And that is a very different level of push, right? There's a difference between riding a roller coaster and trying to drive it, I think. And I know myself well enough that I am often trying desperately to drive the roller coaster. Like, can you imagine just sitting in the front of it and holding out as tight as you can and trying to move it in a new direction? Like, that's not how roller coasters work. This is taking your hands off, right? Letting it be what it is and take the time it takes. All right, and then there's one more, and I cheated a little because, well, I cheat. As I was also the teacher that, you know, when you pick names off of popsicle sticks in an elementary classroom, have you ever done that? Where you like randomize? Like I was always the one that would pick a popsicle stick and then call some other kid's name and they'd be like, you're cheating. And be like, yeah, I'm the adult. Like I cheat. Like this is how it is sometimes. The cheating here is you can be 10% more kind to yourself about this. Like no one died from being 10% nicer to ourselves. You could even be 100% nicer to yourself, but I don't know if I could sell you that today. I bet I could sell you 10% though, right? Like, even if you're just a tiny bit nicer about it, about like, you're going to get there, it's going to work out. There are people in your corner, right? Giving yourself just a touch more grace goes a long way. And that's the end of this. So tell me some things. Tell me what you think. Tell me what's useful.